one of the most remarkable historical records of its kind to be found anywhere in ancient literature. So let's begin this season. We're going to begin to read. We're going to read the entire chapter, and then we'll come back. And, as we're reading through this, there's a whole lot of names. And if you're not careful, you're going to say, my soul, why is this even in the Bible? I mean, it's not even important. Let me tell you, it's important. You're going to be covering this season, and we won't cover it all, but the Bible covers and introduces about 70 nations or national groups right here. And some of the people that we're going to cover here tonight that seems like just an obscure, boring name is mentioned. One of them's like 45 times. One of them mentioned 100 times. One of them, several of them, very major interactions with people like Abraham, people like David, in the Word of God. And some of the places that we're going to talk about that seem so obscure right now are very significant in Bible prophecy, especially Ezekiel 38. So let's begin to read. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Taras. And the sons of Gomer, Ashpenaz, and Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan, Elishah, and Tarshish, and Kittim, and Dodanim. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. And the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, and Put, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, Seba, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Raamah, and Sabteka. And the sons of Raamah, Sheba, and Dedan. And you have heard of the queen of Sheba, haven't you? Okay. See there? And Cush begat or birthed Nimrod. Now, you know who Nimrod is. Now, just remember where he came from. Because where he came from and what he started, which was Babel, he started Babel. Nimrod, we'll touch it in a minute. Nimrod was a rebel against God, all right? He's a very powerful man. So he started the city of Babel, hence Babylon, and God's going to finish it. So you pick it up right here in Genesis 10. You get your first mention of this place called Babel or Babylon, which Babel means confusion. So you first mention of Babylon in chapter 10, and you're going to get the last chapter all the way over to chapter 17 and 18 of the book of Revelation, where God is going to end the story on that wicked city. So you see how it all plays together. Well, verse 9 says, he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Asher, and builded Nineveh, and the city of Rehoboth, and Calais. And Rezin built Nineveh, and Calais, the same as a great city. And Mizraim begat Ludum, and Anamim, and Lehabim, and Natuhim. And excuse me. There's a whole lot of hymns. And Pathrusim, Cashews, and we read these and they don't mean anything. Some of them are talking about entire nations like the land of Egypt or the Philistines. We'll get into that shortly. Verse number 15, and Canaan begat Sidon his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgasite, and the Hivite, and the Akite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. And afterward were the families of the Canaanites, that's the main thing, spread abroad. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Gerar, unto Gaza, as thou goest into Sodom, and Gomorrah, and Admah, and Zeboim, and even unto Lasha. These are the sons of Ham, after their families, after their tongues, in their countries, and in their nations. Now unto Shem. You see, the entire population comes from these three fellas. Shem, Ham, Japheth. Okay? Everybody does. Everybody comes. I don't care what nationality you are. I don't care if you're Chinese, Japanese, if you're Asiatic. I don't care if you're German, if you're Russian. I don't care if you're Indonesian, if you're American, if you're American Indian. I don't care if you're Central American, Mexican, Colombian. Everybody comes from Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah. a lot of people, if they would simply read the Bible and believe the Bible, would have a whole lot less racial problems in this nation. A lot of them just don't read the Bible. They don't know it. They don't understand it. Next, Shem. Also, father of the children of Eber. That's an interesting word. Hang on to that word Eber. Because all you have to do is put a rough breathing on that sound and you got Heber or Hebrew. All right? So, the children of Heber, the brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. And the children of Shem, Elam and Asher and Arphaxad and Lud and Aram, and the children of Aram, Uz and Hul and Gether and Mash and Arphaxad. Circle that name right there because Luke mentions that name. See, now you're going to see a great division. We'll throw a chart in just a little bit. You're going to see a great dividing mark even in Shem, because about half of the line of Shem is going to fall over and the Messianic line is going to come through him. All right? Arphaxad is that line. And Arphaxad begat Salah. Salah begat Heber. And unto Heber were born 2 sons. That's where the division takes place. The name of one was Peleg. And in his days was the earth divided. And his brother's name was Joktan. And Joktan begat Almadad and Sheleth and Hazmaravath and Jerah and Hadoram and Ezel and Diklah and Obal and Abimael and Sheba and Ophir and Havilah and Jobab. And all these were the sons of Joktan. They're still out of the line of Shem. Okay? And their dwelling was from Mesha, as thou goest into Sephar, a land of the east. And these are the sons of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, and their lands, and after their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah, after their generations, in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. Look at our first slide right here. And we're going to see right there, it all comes from Noah. Now, we could go back before Noah. Everybody descends from one of these 3 sons right here. And let's look at our second slide right here. And you'll notice that in verse number 5, by these were the isles of the Gentiles divided, everyone after his tongue and after their families or after their clans. It means the same thing. So a clan is the family in a larger sense, and they were associated with nations, and they were associated with territories. Look at our next slide here. And so in these verses, the clans are associated with nations. That's the next word down in verse 5. And so the Gentiles were divided, everyone after his tongue, after their families / clans, in their nations. All right? So we're going to see nations that literally come out of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All right? So clans are associated with nations, and the clans are also associated with territories. In a little bit, we're going to see where these sons took off and went to, and literally see how the nations spread out from them. But notice what it said, and it speaks about their territory. So one guy said, a people, talking about nations, who possess a common kinship, a social and or political group, and or simply just a people. But I noticed the word there that they were associated with territories. The Bible recognizes that people need to feel an attachment to a particular location and to become owners of a piece of land that they maintain. And so I think about capitalism. And under capitalism, at least in the United States, you are allowed to own land. That is not true in some communist countries. You cannot own land in Red China. Now, you can get a certificate of ownership, and you can own a building. You can own a house, but you can't own the land. Doesn't that make you feel great? They nationalized all the property in 1949. You cannot own land in North Korea. That doesn't surprise you, does it? No, because the state owns the land. You can own land in Russia if you have a permit. So I'm going to capitalism. Now, let's look at our next. And you'll begin to kind of see right here where, so it's going to all originate in this point right in here, okay? And we'll maybe the ark. Maybe the ark was somewhere in this area. And so there's where Shem, Ham, and Japheth start taking off. This is the table of nations, all right? So you're going to see up here Europe and Asia. That's going to be Japheth. We'll see that in a moment. Over here is Ham, not just there, but here too. And then this is going to be the region of Shem. Let's look at our next slide we have. And so it's a little bit harder to see, but here you're going to have Egypt. You're going to have the continent of Africa. Here you've got, we've got Saudi Arabia. You got Israel right up in just about where the dots are. That's about all Israel's got. You know, Israel is about the size of the state of New Jersey. It's not even as big as North Carolina, all right? And they're literally fighting for their life. Okay, so above that, this is called the Fertile Crescent. It goes from here right around there. It's called that because of these rivers, Euphrates, the Tigris River. And so up here is Japheth, all right? So you've got Russia up in this area. You're going to have Turkey over in this area right here. You got Europe over here. There's the boot, but that's Italy. You go on up, and you got Great Britain, etc. So notice, let's go to, actually, before we go to our next slide, I want to talk a little bit about Japheth. All right, Japheth. So when we talk about Japheth, you're talking about people like the Medes, the Greeks, the Cypriots, etc., people like this here. We're going to come to a whole breakdown on Japheth in just a second. Let's look at our next slide. Yeah, I think we need to go to our next slide right there. Now, this one, if we could read the fine print on it, it's going to be talking like 40,000 years ago. That's about as good as I could find for spread of nations. So notice this right here. We're over in, roughly right in there is the land of Israel. And so we're seeing that they're spreading out from this area. So you're going to have those who spread to the African continent, those in Egypt. We're going to have those who are going to spread in the region of Asia, Australia, and then you're going to have a group that goes up here. Now, there's some who believe that it was Hamites who literally went all the way across through Alaska, became what we know today as American Indians. Now, I can't prove that, but that's a theory. That is a thought right there. So we're talking about the spread of the nations. That gives you an idea. Let's look at our next slide here. And so this is going to be, it's not everybody, but this is a good portion of the group of Japheth. We talk about the son of Noah, Japheth, and this is what his descendants come out. So you got Gomer, which is basically Germany, all right? Magog, modern-day Russia. Now, there's more that plays into that, roughly. Madai, that's the Medes, and your old buddy Iran, okay? Which they just got through a legend was wanting to kill our president-elect. They deny it, but anyway. You got Javan, it's basically the Greeks, the Ionians, the Greeks. Tubal. Now, the Scythians is an old word. Just put beside of that Scythians, Turkey, northern Turkey, and Russia, all right? But you look back in history, geography, you'll see the word Scythians right there. And then you come down to Meshech and Taras, and once again, Turkey. So, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, when you begin to study prophecy in the book of Ezekiel 38, you're going to get names like Gomer. That's going to come up. You're going to get names like Magog. Remember, Gog and Magog, all right? You're going to get names like Meshech and Tubal and Tobolsk, all right? So that gives you an idea. And see, that's a prophetic event that is getting ready to happen. It's going to be happening in the future. So it helps us in our Bible study to kind of know the region that some of these people are going to be coming from. Now, another interesting word, one of the sons of Japheth, I think, was Ashkenaz. Does that ring a name with anybody? Make you think of anything? Have you ever heard of Ashkenazi Jews? Well, Ashkenazi Jews comprise about 80% of all the Jewish population, all right? You've got, I'll probably say it wrong, Ashkenazi, and then you've got Sephardic Jews. Sephardic Jews basically had roots in modern-day Spain and Portugal. So Sephardic means Spain. They only comprise about 20%. You say, well, what's the big deal about that? Well, it's quite a big deal. You see, all Jews are not just isolated to the land of Israel, okay? And so you got the Ashkenazi. We'll have to leave those slides up there. They don't need to see me on TV. They need to see the slides. All right. And so they're out of the line of Japheth, all right, at least the region. And you got these sons of Shem, these Jews who have migrated to a number of different regions. Boy, the whole history of Judaism is just phenomenal. It's just amazing. When you think about what the Jews went through during the Middle Ages and the persecutions they got. They were persecuted. You remember when the Black Plague hit London? And, I mean, people were dying like crazy. But in the colony of the Jews, they were not dying like crazy. Well, they get blamed. They begin to blame these Jews, and so that they were persecuted for that. Basically, the Jews were just following the health practices of the Old Testament because the Black Plague was being spread by mice, fleas, things like that. And those Jews just simply, they followed the Bible. They just had cleaner environment. Madai was one of the people that was mentioned as one of the Japhethites. That's northern Iran, okay? Let's look on here and look at some other people. Togarmah, southwest Armenia. Now let's look at the sons of Ham just a second. Let's go and visit Mr. Ham. Now I think this is really interesting because I think Chris touched on it last week, but if you just read the Bible in a very cursory manner, you'll say, well, Ham was cursed. Ham was not cursed. We need to understand that. Because some people want to act like the entire family line of Ham was cursed. They were not. It was just that guy right there. Canaan was cursed. All right? That's where the curse is at. So you look at Ham, you've got Cush, that's one of his sons. Where's that? That's South Egypt, that's Ethiopia. Misraim, that's the Philistines. Put, but they think it's ancient Libya. Canaan, well, we read a whole lot of names a while ago dealing with Canaan. I want to touch on some of that in a few moments. And then you got the old dude here, that's not a land, that's a man, Nimrod. But he develops the lands, the cities of Babylon and the regions of Nineveh. And then you've got Heth. Say, Heth? Yeah, the Hittites. Does that name ring a bell? Uriah? How about his wife? Bathsheba? That David stole away from Uriah. And what does it refer to? Uriah the Hittite. And the Hittites were the sons of Heth. So you see, these names are so significant. They play such an important role. Havilah. Who is that? That was one of the sons of Ham, and that's modern-day Yemen. Well, we're certainly in the news, aren't they? Modern-day Yemen. Misraim is mentioned because he's the father of the Casluhites. Well, who's that? That's the Philistines. The Philistines come from those people right there. And when we think about Canaan, all right, now we mentioned Canaan right here. The curse was only put on Canaan, not on the rest of these people right here, just Canaan. That is very, very significant. And if that's all you get tonight, I want you to remember that. Because some people go out who are very ill-informed, and they say, God cursed Ham, curse all their children, curse all of Ham. God didn't curse all of Ham. The curse rested on Canaan. And you say, well, why was that? Well, I'm going to say this. I think part of it was prophetic because Canaan was the land that Israel went into after they left their bondage in Egypt, and they battled the Canaanites. God promised that land to his people, and that's going to be very important. That's very significant. I will say this here about old Heth. You do remember Rebekah, don't you? Remember Rebekah? Yeah, and had a couple of boys, and one of those boys went out and married one or two Canaanite girls. And so when it got time for Jacob, she said, I've had it with these daughters of Heth. These daughters of Heth. All right? She didn't want him marrying one of those. And we've already mentioned Uriah the Hittite. So we're seeing some intermarriage here in between those two. Now, we did touch a little bit on Nimrod. Nimrod, okay? The Bible said he was a mighty hunter of the Lord. He was a rebel. His name means rebel. And he was one of the very first to establish a kingdom. You say, well, isn't that a little tough to call him a rebel? No, not at all. You see, they were to spread out. They were to spread out and what? Populate or repopulate the earth. They weren't all to just hang out right there in around the land of Israel. No, they were to spread, move, go, have families. Well, what did they want to do? They wanted to build a city. That was their desire. They wanted to build a city. They wanted to build a tower, the height thereof. I think we've got a potential picture of that. Let's look. They wanted to build a tower, and I think it was something similar to a ziggurat. You can see these outside of Mexico City. We was down there years ago, and they've got one down there. And if you're man enough, you can climb to the top of it. But I mean, there's a lot of stairs. Now, I wonder why there were so many stairs. Do you think the whole city was going up there? Nah. You see, he was a rebel against God and full of pride. And they're beginning to depart from God, not depart from religion, but depart from God. And so they needed a temple that had stairs where their gods could come down and be with the people. And if you'll look at about all pagan deities, all idols, they may be very distorted, but they're going to look like humans. Well, somebody did come down. God. The one came down they were not planning on. And God came down and looked at what they were doing. And then in chapter 11, we're going to see where God judged them. And part of that judging was the confusion of languages. And that's why you have so many various different languages today. Now, here's another interesting thing about Nimrod, though. When we could go back several slides and look at some of the geographical areas. So here you've got Nimrod, who is a son of, can we flip back several? There was one, it's another one. It gives the, so here, this is the land of Shem, right? But we find Babylon in this area, remember? So here you have got a Hamite by the name of Nimrod building a tower of rebellion against God in a territory that is predominantly that of Shem. Well, that doesn't surprise us, does it? Not at all. Matter of fact, when you think about Shem, now you got to keep this in mind. When you think about Shem, we're not just talking about Jews in particular, okay? No. It's much broader than that. Thank you. Let's go on, because I've got to get over here and we want to talk about our friend Shem. Let's look at Shem. So here we've got Noah, and one of Noah's descendants is Shem. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. One of Shem's descendants is a guy named Eber. Or if you put a rough breathing on that sound, you've got Heber, Hebrew. I think it comes from that. And then you go on down, there's a lot there's a whole chart. You could make about 3 or 4 times this big, but these are predominant names. You come down so far, and Arphaxad is also in this line in here, okay? And that's who is mentioned in the line of the Messiah in Luke chapter, I think it's chapter 2. All right, but it comes down to these two guys, Joktan and Peleg. And right there is where it splits up. And this is the line. You have Ru, Serug. You remember Nahor, don't you? Nahor, the father of Terah, the father of Abraham. And so the line of Jesus comes through this line right here. All right? And you may have others who are Shemitic, if you please, in that land of Shem, who are not Jews proper. Matter of fact, I just caught the headline, but one of the Arab leaders, I think, had came out and was wanting President Trump to finish what he started. What was that? They started the Abraham Accords. You see, you've got people over there. You've got Muslims who claim Abraham, all right? They claim Abraham also, just like Jews do. And you see, so President-elect Trump, during his first term, they worked on a plan called the Abraham Accords, and they were trying to bring peace to the area. And it's not this two-state solution where you go in and take the city of Jerusalem and divide it in the middle, and you got, no. Now, we know something, don't we? We know something they may not know. We know there's going to be a temple rebuilt someday in the future. And we know that God will take care of that right there. Now, how he's going to do that, I do not know. So that's what you've got. And you've got the line of the Messiah who comes right down this line here out from the line of Shem. So Peleg is going to be the progenitor of Abraham. We have another guy's name. He wasn't on here, but Asher. So Asher lived in Assyria. They were the forerunners of the later Assyrian Empire. You say, but yeah, they were the enemies of Israel. They were. And so some of the early progenitors, though, goes back, and they're still in the line of Shem. You see what I'm saying? Not everybody in the line of Shem was followers of the true God. Not everybody in the line of Shem was what we would call Jews today. And you're going to see this is going to start changing now in chapter number 11. Towards the very end of 11, you're going to find introduced those guys right there. Terah and his son Abraham, and Abraham's half-sister Sarah, okay? And they're going to leave the land over there near Ur of the Chaldees, and they're going to come to the land of Canaan, all right, land of Canaan. So, anyway, there's your study. We're not going to do that one right there. We're not going to do any of those. We're through with all the slides. Thank you. So, that gives you, in kind of a nutshell, the nationalities, the nations, etc., that we're looking at here in chapter number 10 of Genesis. And you're going to see some of these names later on as Israel goes into the land, as Israel conquers the land, as they conquer the Canaanites, as they fight with the Philistines. The Philistines were perpetual enemies of Israel. I mean, you go all the way back to Saul, King David. I'm sure they were basically subdued under Solomon. But you have young David going out, fighting Goliath. Who was he? He was a Philistine, okay? He was out of the line of Ham, all right? So anyway, there you go. There's your Bible study tonight on Genesis 10.
I was looking at some of them names. I was like, boy, I'm glad you had that. And when you think about the Middle East, there's no easy solution because this goes back thousands of years. And so, we're not going to run over there. But God has all of that. From the table of nations, from the dividing of that, and then as it's going to be submitted, where all kingdoms, all nations will fall underneath his reign. Aren't you looking forward to that day when the government will be upon his shoulders and he'll sit in his rightful place? And so what a great day that is. And so Genesis is the beginning. So getting a hold of those table of nations helps you as you go through your in-depth Bible study and territories and groups and peoples that'll help you get a hold of that. It's one of the reasons why, you mentioned President-elect Trump. He chose Mike Huckabee to be the ambassador to Israel, and he has a biblical knowledge. So you're going to hear a lot of things come out. And he mentioned, he don't believe in Palestine. Well, he's right. That is not a thing. It's a word, if you look, was made up to put in the political to cause people to fight. And so he has a biblical worldview of that situation. So I'm just looking forward to where that goes. with that. So thank you, Pastor Setzer, for tackling that chapter. Lord, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for being the God who's revealed things to us. And as we look at the complexity of Genesis chapter 10, as you're revealing things and showing us as maybe in our study and put firm roots in some things, that we have some depth to us as we study our Bibles. So we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.